Um, Welcome to our webinar, Changing Tides, Novel Approaches to Combating Digital Piracy. My name is Umair Kazi. I'm a staff attorney at the Authors Guild. I'm joined today by our General Counsel, Cheryl Davis, and Serena Bowen, who is a best-selling romance author and Authors Guild member who's been fighting online pirates quite intrepidly for some time. And she's got a lot of knowledge and experience in the various things you can do online to sort of take a stand against this massive scourge almost. So our goal today for the webinar is to hopefully empower you and give you some extra confidence to take on pirates. I know that a lot of authors, it's a very confusing, befuddling world out there with so many changes taking place every day, new formats coming up, hundreds, uncountable, it's not even hundreds of thousands, but uncountable websites that either have infringing copies of books or pretend to have infringing copies of books. We'll talk about that too, the phishing sites. We'll get started by discussing some recent statistics about the growth in piracy, the impact it's having on author earnings, talk about the different kinds of pirate operations taking place out there, just so you know they're not just a website with infringing copies. There are different ways pirates disseminate infringing copies of books. And then finally, and probably most interestingly, we'll talk about some tricks that you can use on your own to fight back against pirates. We'll be discussing the DMCA takedown notice, which I'm sure many of you are already familiar with. But our focus for the most part will be on what we're calling novel approaches. So understanding kind of the mechanics a little, in a little more detail, and taking action through those corners that we might not be aware of. There's a note, we have a lot of resources available on our website. I highly encourage you to check it out. We have a DMCA takedown form letter that you can send to infringing websites when you find that they're hosting pirated copies of your book. Of course, you can always send us a message at staff@authorsguild.org with any of your concerns, as many of you have. At the end of this webinar, we'll have time for a Q&A. You can send your questions anytime using the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll address them once we get through them too. All right, so Cheryl and Serena, feel free to jump in anytime with your wisdom and experience. Okay, so let's get started with talking about a little bit about how piracy has gone up. I'm sure it's not news to anybody, but it still serves a purpose to know statistically what's going on so we can be better prepared. Piracy alerts we receive constantly. They've gone up actually 300% between 2009 and 2013. 2009 is when eBooks sort of started proliferating the market. And so that's when the spike really took place. And even though it's kind of paired out a little bit, we're still seeing a gradual increase every year. So between 2013 and 2017, we had another 76% increase in ebook piracy alerts. According to Nielsen, the publishing industry watchdog group, ebook piracy costs U.S. publishers $350 million in lost sales every year. And this is coming at a time when authors' incomes are consistently declining, as I'm sure you're aware of from our income survey we did in 2015. The median writing-related income for full-time authors has fallen 30% since 2009. So you can see that every book sale lost to piracy is a lost income for authors. So it's, I don't need to emphasize how important and how critical it is for authors and their advocates to stay vigilant and stay persistent and not get exhausted despite all of this, all of the changes that may seem very intimidating. Right. So there's a slight difference in how, from in my experience, how indie authors and traditionally published authors kind of view piracy. But we think that it's a problem that affects authors across the board. You know, I think traditionally published authors who may not have experience kind of dealing with the mechanics of the internet and the digital environment very much, they might feel a little more confused. And I think at that point, maybe the experience of indie authors who've been playing more of a role of a entrepreneur, not only in as in marketing and promotion of their books, but also in copyright infringement, copyright enforcement. Okay. So slides moving on the screen, sure. I think. Click here.
Yeah, just make a click anywhere on the screen.
Okay, I'll go back to the slide. Sorry, we were just making sure that we're actually moving through the content. So, you know, publishers are contractually, even though they're contractually bound to take action against piracy, more and more they don't have the resources to do so. And especially if you consider how piracy has become almost unenforceable. So, and publisher incomes are also declining because of various factors in the market. So traditionally published authors might, you know, find that their book has been pirated, and they might go to their agent or publisher only to discover that the publisher, you know, is not to say that they're not interested, they just don't have the capacity to take on the infringers in a way that would be effective. Also, as genre writing, a lot of genre writing has been migrating into an all digital medium. So that makes all of that, the onus of discovering, target, and taking action against piracy almost is on the author. They don't have agents or publishers, so authors have to be constantly in the know about what's going on in the digital landscape to take action. And here, I think I kind of, Serena, I wanted to turn to you a little bit, because you know you've been an observer of how genre writing has changed over the years, and sort of have tons of experience also in you know, being a self-published entrepreneurial author. What changes have you seen? What are, like, in your experience, your own words?
Sure. So here's the thing about self-publishing. It changed the landscape in terms of who can publish. And so it empowered a lot of people to distribute ebooks to anyone very cheaply and easily. And of course, when you empower publishers to publish, you also empower pirates to pirate. And when we talk about piracy, we always have this double-edged sword of if it's easy for me to get my work out into the world, then it's just as easy for someone to steal it. And I wanted to go back to your point about publishers handling these things differently, because I have 10 publishers on 4 continents, and every one of them handles the issue of piracy differently. Some publishers make the choice not to fight piracy, and some of them are very good at it, or they employ somebody who's really good at it. So you have to, as an author, if you're traditionally published, you have 2 choices. You can either make yourself very familiar with your publisher's approach. For example, on the Penguin Random House author portal, if you're logged in, there's a place where you can tell Penguin, here's a pirated copy of my work. It's baked right into their author portal. So if that's your publisher, you should know where to find that. And but here's another thing. It is your right as a copyright holder to always go after that pirate yourself. And of course, nobody needs extra jobs. And I have a lot of empathy for authors who think, I just want to write the book. I don't want that to be my problem. But you should know at least that it is your right to do so as a copyright holder. So the way that the Digital Millennium Copyright Act works, it's either the copyright holder or his appointed agent, which in this case would be your publisher. Either one of you can legally issue a cease and desist notice and take care of the problem. So if you're an author, even who has a publisher who cares, sometimes you want to go after that link yourself because, one, you will learn something about piracy in the world and how it affects you as an author. And also you might feel like you have a little more control over that. So it almost doesn't matter who publishes you. If you're thinking about this, if you're here today listening to this, it's because you understand that it affects you and that you have options.
Thank you, Serena. That was super encouraging. I mean, even for me, who's not an author, but I totally agree with you. I think an understanding of copyright and maybe also a passionate protection or some sort of passion towards your copyright as an author is can only help you because it is your work, and it's I don't want to go into the history of copyright, but it is fundamental to our civic society, democracy, and it's a specifically articulated right that you have as authors. So vigilantly, intrepidly go after. Okay, so let's switch gears just a little bit and talk about the kind of different types of piracy that we see. And I'm sure many of you watching already know some of these offenders. So the biggest kind of plaguing problem is torrents and book repositories and pirate libraries, and these kind of exist on a transnational level where countries are going after and trying to shut these down. LiveGen and Sci-Hub are the two most notorious examples of this. Pirate Bay, and they have millions and millions of books and other content, scientific content, eBooks, fiction, poetry, any they're book repositories, and it's freely available. These sites tend to keep migrating from countries because if a country will get to a point where they want to enforce copyright against the website, so they might just go to another country, and they're also very politically charged. They actually they're sort of part of the free information or free culture movement in a sense, and without recognizing that they're actually hurting the production of culture and literary production, because if authors are not feeling protected, it really stunts, and then they're spending so much time trying to protect the books that are already out there. It really stunts that process of writing. The second offenders are just your garden variety illegal websites, and there's one that Serena brought to our attention, and that we've been dealing with and trying to figure out how to get them to stop doing what they're doing is eBook Bike, which I believe previously TEFL, the something free library. It was a website under a different name, and then they recently changed their name to ebook.bike. So these websites can operate in different ways. They might just have ebook copies, EPUBs, Mobi, any number of formats, PDFs that anyone can just go and download from the websites. Or in the case of eBook Bike, they have sort of created this, they kind of couch themselves as a ebook sharing website. It's to slightly circumvent, copyright law, which is not, they're essentially propagating pirated content, DRM-free ebooks. So the third type of piracy that we see and that we have been working on, and maybe Cheryl, I might ask for your input here and to kind of inform our members about what we've been doing with respect to how pirated books, counterfeit books might appear on Amazon, where you have pirates who scan a book that's under copyright and then use services like CreateSpace to produce and sell counterfeit copies. Oftentimes also we've heard of other cases where there's counterfeit stock coming in and being sold from fairly legitimate third-party vendors on Amazon. A lot of times kind of even the vendors might not know if the book is counterfeit because the printing has improved so much. Cheryl, did you have? Can you just maybe give us a short rundown on how what our successes and sort of what we're working on with regards to some of the big vendors like Amazon?
Well, hi everybody. We have actually been reaching out to and trying to work with Amazon in connection with such issues as piracy and counterfeit publishing of books. And we bring those issues to their attention. When they're brought to our attention, we have a contact at Amazon to whom we report these incidents, and they look into it. And if they find out something is going on wrong, then they take action against the counterfeiter. Against the person who's selling the counterfeit copies. They advise them, look, these are counterfeit copies and you're not allowed to sell them here. So if you become aware of those sorts of things, we urge you to reach out to us so we can reach out then to Amazon in connection with that. That's also in connection with, we also deal with Amazon in connection with the buy box, and determining when people are selling not new books as new books. So we have a pipeline to Amazon to communicate about those issues as well.
Thanks, Cheryl. And I think it also goes to what you just said, also kind of goes to Serena's earlier point about authors and authors advocates, the Authors Guild being a representative organization, really going after, like kind of taking a more proactive approach, because, we can hope that Google and Amazon and Twitter and Facebook and all of these wonderfully huge behemoths will suddenly grow a heart for authors and protect our rights. But I think the point is that we have to be proactive and reach out to them and really insist that what they're doing is what's happening is wrong for so many reasons, and it could really be a disadvantage to huge scale.
And we've actually reached out to Google as well, and I'll talk about that conversation a little later on in the webinar.
Yeah, that's also another very interesting point that we're going to touch on is pirated sites showing up in search results. Just quickly, a couple of other types of piracy that we see. We've recently been seeing pirated translations, which is also, so it seems to be so far an issue that is a little specific to indie authors, is that they may have a huge fan group in Argentina, for instance, and sort of like dedicated fans just translating a book into another language and sharing it and selling it. So that's and again, like I think that point really sort of shows how the community of writers and authors and readers are so intimately connected. And so another thing that authors have to sort of remind their readers and their fans is that, look, like, you not paying for the book is actually stopping me from writing the books that you like. That right, Serena? I
have said that same thing to people often. In fact, there's a ring of people who translate my books illegally into Portuguese and distribute them. And I have written them letters that say, listen, I would love for this book to come to Brazil, but you're preventing that from happening because the Brazilian publisher will not buy this book and publish it if there's pirated bootleg translation copies sitting around on Google Drives. So those are actually the ones that I go after the hardest, because they're taking, foreign rights payments right out of my pocket. And there are a couple countries where whenever somebody joins my Facebook group as a fan, I'm immediately suspicious. You know, did she read it in English? Or, you know, or sometimes I'll see a review on Goodreads and it'll say, I loved this book, but the translation is kind of bad. And I'm thinking, you know, well, honey, I haven't sold that book, you know, in that language. And Russian, Portuguese, and Spanish are the three languages where I most commonly find bootleg transactions. And if you're curious, if you have any bootleg translations, you can look. One of the places where they pop up is on a website called Issuu, ISSUU, and that is a legitimate file sharing website with a real purpose in the world. But for some reason, the bootleg translators love to share PDFs on Issuu. So if I will often go and type my name into Issuu just to see what comes up.
And maybe this is something that we can get into a little bit later, but I just wanted to ask you, what has the response been from your sort of fan communities? Is it mixed? I mean, obviously, but you can probably also get some fans on your site to say to other fans, look, don't do this.
No, I don't go there, because a reader who finds a bootleg translation, she doesn't know and she doesn't really care. And I'm not going to offend the entire population of Brazilian readers by telling them that, you know, I have this big problem in their country. And instead I take it a different way and I issue takedowns like crazy. And I have an assistant who helps me with this. And I sold one of these books into Brazil recently that I had sort of squelched on the internet. So, you know, that's my way of handling it.
Thank you so much, Serena. So, all right. So I think that, a final point here is scam sites and phishing sites. And we have a whole slide on that. So we'll just get to that later and move on right now to talking a little bit about the legal remedies. You know, I think we've dwelt on despairing statistics far too long. And, you know, after all, our goal is to talk about some concrete steps that authors can take. Some of them have already been mentioned and become part of the conversation. So the remedial measures, obviously the biggest one is the 512 DMCA takedown notice. We'll get into the specifics of that a little bit more. I'm sure it's something that most authors have at least heard of or are familiar with, but I think, as Serena keeps emphasizing, is that really need to understand how it works, and we'll get and the weaknesses and limitations a little bit, so you can circumvent them. So we'll talk about that just a little bit. And these steps may not be perfect, but with persistence, vigilance, and support of peers in the writing community, they can go a long way. And we just can't afford to give up the fight. So let's actually, I mean, I thought I was going, there was more before there's going to be more of a buildup before we got to the DMCA, but it's right here. So the DMCA requires a copyright holder to send, there are statutory requirements for a takedown notice. It has to contain a physical or electronic signature of an authorized person. It has to specifically identify the material that you are claiming is infringing or is the subject of infringing activity. And it has to, the DMCA asks you to specifically identify the location. So if it's a website, it is the specific URL that you will be putting into the DMCA form letter. And then at the end of the letter, you have to state that you believe in good faith that this is infringement, and you're making this claim under penalty of perjury. So if the good faith requirement is a way for website hosts, etc., to sort of to protect themselves from frivolous claims, frivolous takedown notices. So you really have to sort of know that this is that the website is infringing your copyright before you can make the claim. So see, there are a few different steps to it, and I wonder if maybe this would also be a good point to show our DMCA form letter that we have. We've been using, it's on our website, and it does contain the statutory elements. I'm just going to take 1 second to navigate to it.
Can I just say something while you do that?
Please, please.
It sounds really intimidating issuing this cease and desist letter, but it's really, really not a big deal. People do it, you know, a dozen times a day. Some sites will make it sound like you're, you know, banking your soul on this information, but you should also know what's the mechanism of why this letter exists, which is that the law says that every big internet host has to have a mechanism by which anyone can make a copyright claim. So that means all the big giants like Google and Facebook and everybody has to have a door that you can walk through and say, this is my copyright content and please take it down. So any big website has a place for you to do that. And if you write an email to somebody and nothing happens, that means you probably just didn't walk through the right door. So Google has a door, Facebook has a door, Goodreads has a door, Wattpad has a door. Everybody has a spot on their website, you know, where you can send this notice and be heard. So if you can't find it, keep looking, especially if it's an upstanding website like that. And yes, you'll want to get the language right as per this example. But as long as you have the basic facts there, you should expect success, especially with a commercial website that is commonly known.
Absolutely, and Serena, we're gonna when we move forward a little bit, we're gonna talk about. I'm gonna show them the Google DMCA dashboard, and also their phishing site complaint form. They are legally obligated to respond and review and respond to those complaints. And in our experience, Amazon has been fairly responsive to takedown notices. They will even if they get a notice, they'll take down the infringing copy and then have a 10 or 15-day investigatory period where they'll talk to both the author and the infringer, and then separately, and then decide whether or not to keep the copy up or not. Oftentimes, they take it down completely. So just quickly, this is the form letter. I mean, we've been sending it. If you need a copy of this, you can email staff@authorsguild.org, and we'll send you a clean copy. This is the form letter that we used, a takedown notice that we used as an example during our open library campaign. And as you'll see, it breaks down all the information. My books are entitled, you list the books, they are located, and you list each individual URL of where the infringing copy of your book resides, and then your contact information, and then finally the perjury statement, which is the good faith statement that I mentioned earlier. Yes, I think Serena made a very good point that it sounds intimidating and legalese, but it's actually kind of like a common process every day. And it's not just big, Hollywood studios and music production companies that are sending these out. It's people, everyday authors and artists, musicians.
And that actually is one of the reasons that we at the Guild are here, is to help explain your rights to you as authors, and to help simplify it in ways that so that it becomes clearer and more understandable. And if you have questions, please do feel free to reach out to us.
Absolutely. And I think we're one of the things that we're working on is making a sort of form DMCA takedown generator where you can kind of plug in your information, and the form will produce a takedown notice for you that then you can send to the infringing website. We're still in the process of that, so hopefully we'll get there very soon. We talked about, so let's jumping off from jumping off from the specificity required by the takedown notice, we'll talk a little bit about this problem of whack-a-mole. So you might have heard of this. It's basically the issue that authors run into where they might send a takedown notice, the website complies, but next day they see that the infringing copy is either on the same website again, it pops back up on the same website, or it's on a different website. And one of the reasons for that is that the takedown notice requires you to identify a specific URL. So if the host of the content actually takes down that URL, it can still exist on a different URL. And that is one, there are many reasons for this whack-a-mole ordeal, but that is certainly one of them. Can you go back to the next? And the bigger sites like Amazon, Google, Facebook, they have their designated agent, the DMCA designated agent. It's a specific email address and address where you can send a takedown notice and they'll review it. There are some kind of facially legitimate sites that have put up this language that they are actually DMCA compliant, and they have a DMCA form, but the form might not be functional, as we recently found in the case of eBook Bike, where they have a DMCA form and people have been sending them takedown notices, but they just the form is never functional. So there might and then there are pirate sites that they might just not have any information. They might not have a DMCA designated agent or any mechanism for the copyright holder to complain about infringing copies on this website. So like we've been talking about, there's a little bit of there's a little bit of self-education that you have to do. The shadier sites will not have any sort of DMCA mechanism, but then maybe like the more deceitful sites will have something, but it just won't work or they won't respond. At the same time, as Serena has mentioned, there are many cases of websites actually complying. So just because there are the mechanism might not be upfront and maybe complicated doesn't mean you shouldn't use it. Okay, on the DMCA, because we've been talking at length about it, and we have covered a lot. Covered a lot of the DMCA in our blog too, and we've often voiced our sort of dissatisfaction with how far it goes to protect authors, in that respect, it is an older law. It was legislated in 1998, so it certainly has not been able to keep up with all the different new formats and the different ways pirates are operating now. So Cheryl, I was wondering if you could talk just a little bit about some sort of legislative alternatives, not necessarily substituting the DMCA, but maybe some other actions that Congress is considering to make the internet a more author-friendly, creative, rights holder-friendly place.
Well, we have definitely been advocating for Congress to take new action in this area. Historically, the problem has been that the DMCA not only puts the burden of enforcement on the creators to report when their work has been infringed upon, the courts have historically interpreted the DMCA in ways that really go against the creator and in fact support more of the ISPs by saying that the ISPs don't really have to do a lot in order to enforce this. So we were actually encouraged by the fact that there's a recent decision out there at BMG Rights where a court actually required an RSP to have and enforce reasonable repeat infringer policies. And what we think that Congress should do is set up a reasonable rulemaking process to set out what sorts of policies an ISP needs to have. We think that a rulemaking process would invite interested parties to take part and to be able to express their concerns about what sorts of rules are reasonable or unreasonable. But bottom line is, that would give courts guidance on how to enforce the DMCA. The DMCA needs to be made clearer so that people know what's permissible, what's not permissible, and to try to avoid the need to do whack-a-mole by having reasonable repeat infringer policies.
Absolutely. I think the reasonable repeat infringer policy, I believe it was a Second Circuit Court, the BMG one, where I think they very specifically said that having an infringer come back up on the website or removing an infringer only after 33 instances is not reasonable. So, yeah. Which is the first, because it was a sort of an undefined thing. What is a reasonable infringer? How often can you allow the same party to just come back on your website and post infringing content again? So that was a very good decision to limit the DMCA safe harbor, which basically allows ISPs and other hosts to kind of evade liability for a contributory infringement liability for their users who post infringing content. If they have a if they have a designated DMCA agent, someone that can receive takedown notices, and they have a repeat infringer policy where people that continue to participate in piracy are eventually kicked out. So thank you, Cheryl. That was that was very helpful. I totally forgot about that case, even though it was fairly recent. And on that, if I could also ask you, because it seems like we've been talking about these different players on the piracy, the field of piracy, so to speak. There are legislators, there's Congress, there are the creators, and there are the tech companies. So we've one of the things that we keep bringing up is that taking a stand against piracy is entirely within the power and capacity of a lot of these big tech companies, Amazon, Google. But for some reason, they've continued to turn a blind eye. But lately, they as they're kind of coming under more greater scrutiny for other practices, they're maybe listening a little bit more to authors complaining about that. Cheryl, you recently had a call with Google, and I was wondering if you could share with our audience what you've discussed, and specifically about pirated search results showing up before the author's website. Oftentimes, those are promoted in Google results than the author's own website, or legitimate links selling the author's book.
Yes, recently I and our executive director, Mary Rasenberger, had a discussion with representatives of Google on precisely this topic. And unfortunately, Google has had a fair amount of experience in addressing these kinds of issues in the music and film industry. And so their program is going to expand essentially a bit more to cover authors as well, as we bring to their attention. But they do have processes by which what they call demote pirated websites. And what their recommended procedure is to figure out what the most popular pirated websites out there are, and to have a coordinated attack against them, namely issuing multiple instructions, multiple DMCA takedown notices to a particular website targeting them, getting that site demoted in the Google search. Google says that they have demoted about 65,000 of these websites since they set up this program, and demote about 500 to 600 websites a week. And what that does is that moves them down on the search. And according to Google's figures, they can lose up to 90% of their Google traffic as a result of moving those down the site. So what we're going to try to do is to try to come up with a more strategic approach to doing that sort of thing, and dealing with other organizations to try to figure out how we can group together multiple notices and complaints so we can target the sites. And they said one of the goals is to figure out, to target sites before they become so popular that people search for them individually. Because this doesn't necessarily remove the sites from Google's search engine altogether. If people are going to specifically search for a site, then Google will allow them to locate it. But the thing is to take them so far down the search, if somebody's looking for a book, that this pirate website won't come up until like several pages later, in which case people have usually given up and trying to find a pirated copy. But one other thing, we brought up the issue where people have said that the pirated websites appear before proper copies of the book or before the author's own website. And the question we were asked is, well, what sort of internet presence does the author actually have? Does the author have an up-to-date website? Does the author have SEO on their page? Because the idea is that the author you should bump up your own internet presence to make sure that your stuff appears before pirated information. Because according to the Google folks we talked to, they said that Google is essentially looking for the most recent, the best information. And you as the author want to make sure that your website has that most recent up-to-date information, make it more attractive to the Google search engine than the pirated website, and then attack the pirating websites.
Yes. Serena.
I actually have pirate search term language on my own website. So if you look in the footer of serenabowen.com, it says, download Serena Bowen titles in EPUB, MOBI, or PDF form from the e-tailer of your choice, or read the book for free at your local library. And read the book for free. Read for free is a pirating search term. Mm-hmm. PDF is a pirating search term. EPUB is a pirating search term. So I'm careful to include that language in my own websites. And when I send out a picture, like a graphic or a book cover, to bloggers, reviewers, anyone, I will actually name that image in a way that is trashily associated with pirate searches. So if you get a picture from me, the picture is fine, but it will have a title like Free EPUB Serena Bowen and then the title of the book. Because I can control the message of how this gets out. And this is something where like educating publicists would go a long way. So I've actually switched tactics almost. I used to ask Google to lose the search term for phishing sites where they don't really have my file, but it just looks like they have my file. And I used to have those taken down from the Google search site, and I don't do that anymore because those are actually useful to me. Like a bad piracy link is more useful to me than taking down a bad piracy link because it could sometimes obscure a real piracy link.
Huh. That is really interesting. That's so you're saying that if there are phishing sites, the cluster of phishing sites can also demote the actual pirate site in Google search results. So it might be annoying to, click through 10 screens, but yeah.
So when you're me, I have a little niche in the market, right? I have a certain I have a kind of reader who's looking for me. And it's my job as an author to figure out which pirating sites are my real problem. So eBook Bike that you mentioned, that is a huge problem for me. And I also have trouble with VK and mobilism. But if you're in a different niche of the publishing world, you might have sites that are different for you, but those are your problem sites. So I focus my attention and my takedowns on those sites that really matter for me. And I can ignore the phishing sites. So let's say I get a Google result. Google sends me an email like, hey, these are all the people talking about Serena Bowen today. And I'll look at that result. And I will click onto some of these websites and I can tell within 5 seconds which of these websites really has my book and which of them is just faking. And so we should pause for a second and ask ourselves, why would a website pretend to have a pirated copy of my book but not actually have one? Because until you understand this, then it's just a big loud roar of a mess, and an author will, you know, throw up her hands and say, I don't know what to do about this. So phishing sites are just like those emails you get telling you that there's a check for you and it can't clear until you type in your information. Phishing sites pretend to have pirated content so that you'll give them, and then you'll go and you'll see, and oh, my book cover is there and it says download here, and you click that download button and you don't get the file. You get a form that's like, actually this content is only available in certain countries. Please fill in your credit card information so we can tell if you're in the right domain. And anytime anybody wants something from you or is really eager to give you the book, those sites are not real. And an author doesn't need to spend a year figuring these things out, because after a while, all the phishing sites start to look exactly the same. If you go to a document on Google Drive and it's exclaiming about how it's going to give you my book for free, if only you click this link, then they don't have it. They wouldn't bother. You know, who advertises giving something away with such dedication? So, or if you go to a site and sometimes you'll see comments on the website that are like, oh, thanks, I wanted this book and now I have it, or this worked great. You know, you can just tell from the exuberance of some of these sites that they're not real. They don't have the book. It's just a facade. And you'll figure out which 5 sites really do have the book and are your constant problem. And then you spend your time on that and you walk it like a cop on the beat, and you send takedown notices just to those places where it really matters. And the easier it is to get your file off a site, that's a site you care about.
Well, thank you so much for that, Serena. I was gonna get into phishing sites on this slide, but you basically covered it. So maybe we could. One thing that we could do is like maybe I have an example phishing site here, and I know
let's see it.
Frustrating because most of the piracy sort of alerts we get from our members involve phishing sites. So I think it'll be good to kind of like demonstrate what they look like. And if you encounter one, if you get a Google alert that says free, like it says free ebook downloads or free PDF download with the title of your book, and you go to this website and it's asking you for credit card information, then it's likely a phishing site. So, you know, we used to, which we're going to change now, we used to recommend reporting phishing sites to Google, but with you know, Serena's new strategy, I think we'll let them be and focus our energies on takedown. So here's, for instance, an example. I clicked on it and cannot locate the internet server. Okay. So
it looks like somebody took that one down for you.
That was too quick. No, it was working half an hour ago before the webinar. So I guess I'll just copy and because I think it'll be good for our audience to see, you know, what these actually look like, and they're scary because they're, you know, credit card information and everything. Yeah, let's switch to the. I guess we can just like right click and copy it, right? Well, we can just go to Google and I'll find it. There we go. All right, so this is a link that I received from one of our members, Muriel's War, American Heirs and Nazi Resistance. So, you know, I mean, one of the things that phishing sites will do is that they will have a very prominent, you know, big red generic download sign. But they will also like make it look like they actually have the book, because they will have copied information, reviews, et cetera, about the book on there, and they'll have a picture. But and then they'll sort of like, you'll go through a maze of links to a page that asks you. So let's click on this download link here, And you see, we are on a different website now called Lifter Pub. Easily read documents online. Again, I think as Serena mentioned, there we are. Finally, I can download it.
Read this.
Thank you.
I love this.
And also a lot of people complaining about how it doesn't work. So
it's very easy to get high quality ebooks here.
Yeah.
All right. So then, now we will get frustrated by clicking another continue, and yet another site. And now they're kind of taking the form of these subscription sites where they say, sign up for free and to give us your credit card information, but then you can download thousands of books. Search for anything, no ads, right? And there's sort of other giveaways too. So this is definitely, there are other giveaways. If this site probably does not have a front page, but let's see if we just go to newtsplay.com. Yeah, so I mean, you can go down and see where the sites are located. Oftentimes they
Bratislava.
Yeah. Cyprus is a big one recently for phishing sites. Romania. So these are sort of like some of the things that you can kind of do to separate the phishing sites, the pirates from the fish, as I continue saying, combining metaphors. Oh, sorry, there we go. Yes. Okay. Okay. So in the event, there's that slide that we have also has a link to Google Safe Browsing form, where you can report phishing sites. I think this site was already reported a few times and it's still online. So, but maybe it's a good thing, as Serena said, to have phishing sites. The fish will deceive the pirates. Or
well, also Google can't just take down a site if they don't like it. They can lose it as a search term.
They can. So yes, it would just not show up in Google search results. So the site will be there, but it won't show up. When I say free copies of Mariel's War and American Heroes,
right.
That's happening. It won't show up. Okay. Quickly, and before we move to some of the questions, Serena, I wanted to ask you, go back to this, like the footer and the metadata stuff that we talked about, and also like kind of in conversation with Cheryl mentioning the SEO. Is this? I mean, it seems like it takes a little bit of a sophisticated sort of internet user and a website builder to maybe change these things, or how would someone who's not made a website but they have a website that someone else is managing, what would they go and tell their website moderator to change to sort of to get the same result?
Okay, well, anyone who's built a website for you should know how to put metadata on your site. And so you would ask to put specific terms. So you really just have to be able to define those terms. And in order to do that, I would suggest that you type, let's say you write thrillers and you want to know what the popular piracy search terms are. So you should open a fresh Google search and you should type in the name of your favorite thriller writer. And then the screen will light up mostly with legitimate stuff because this person is popular. So you'll see Amazon and iBooks and that. But then scroll down to the bottom. And at the very bottom of a Google search page, it says related searches. And the related searches will always tell you what the pirates are looking for. So it might say EPUB online or read online or free PDF. And whatever you find down there, that's what you want to put in your metadata to attract pirate clicks and also to just raise your own website up in the search results. Because if you think about it, a legitimate reader does not search for his favorite book title in Google. He goes right to barnesandnoble.com, Amazon, Kobo, somebody like that, where he's going to find the book.
Yeah.
And that's why pirates use Google, legitimate readers use Amazon.
Mm-hmm. But what if I'm just interested in learning about a book, maybe finding reviews, and I put in the title of a book, and that's when I see all of these, phishing sites.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
That can happen. And I mean, I've made this choice not to take down phishing sites. And part of my decision is this: Google only has 60% of the search term market.
Mm-hmm.
So that means there's other search engines that people are using to find this content. And it's not actually a good use of my time to send takedowns to multiple places.
Yeah.
There is a tool called Blasty,
Mm-hmm.
Blasty. And Blasty is a pay service that allows you to send a takedown simultaneously to the Google search engine takedown, Yahoo, and I believe Bing as well. I actually think that Blasty has some work to do before it's, a perfect solution. One issue I have with a lot of authors who use Blasty is they don't actually understand what Blasty does. And Blasty can't take down the source of a site. Mm-hmm. It can only ask a search engine to lose the address of that URL. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. You need to use Blasty, you need to know what it's doing, and that's fine. Torrents are a great use for Blasty because a torrent is not something you can get taken down because of the way that a torrent dodges all these legal protections we've been talking about. But it is worthwhile to get a torrent URL taken out of a search engine. So that's a great use for Blasty. But a lot of authors that I talk to don't actually know that Blasty can't take the source material down. And then one more thing, which is that Blasty also has a service called AutoBlast. And what AutoBlast does is it finds your content online and then it automatically sends a takedown to Google and places without checking with you first. And this is a terrible idea. Yeah. And the reason it's a terrible idea is that sometimes Blasty can't tell if it's a blogger or a reviewer who is talking about your book and maybe just says, download it here at Amazon, or some wonderful legitimate thing that you want a reviewer to do. And you do not want that person's review site to get a blast from, to Google that says this is infringing content, because of course it's not infringing content. And that's why, you should be in control of your own search and destroy missions.
Certainly. I like that. And also, I think as you were speaking there, Serena, it struck me that a lot of times we take, if an author has a Google alert set to the title of their book, they might get it and immediately take action or sort of come to the conclusion that that's an infringing copy is available. But I think one thing to do and a step to add in between would be to actually do a Google search for your book and see if indeed, the phishing site or the pirate site is showing up in the first few pages. Because if it's not, then, it might not be, it might not be that much of a problem. The second thing is also, takedowns. The only party that can actually take down an infringing copy is the person that is hosting the infringing copy. So to your point about Blasty not being capable of actually taking down an infringing content or infringing content. So let's, there are other some services. Muso is another one, paid services that people that are interested in sort of having more support in dealing with piracy. Let's move to some of these questions that we have received. Randall Ponder asks, have there been any thoughts, discussions about trying to solve pirate sites, illegal sites, approaching them as en masse by legally declaring them criminal enterprises? That as if we know that a particular website or pirate site is doing illegal activity on thousands of authors, why not consolidate efforts and take the entire site down? So there have been, and I think this is one of the problems that happens because it's a jurisdictional problem. A lot of times the pirate sites will just move to a country that cannot be compelled to enforce compelled to enforce a criminal action against them. So that's the most of the litigation around this that I'm aware of has been over the website LiveGen, which has been around for many years now, and Sci-Hub, which oftentimes hosts peer-reviewed scientific papers and other sort of firewalled content from JSTOR and a lot of the academic publishers. So there are efforts, but the problem is enforcement, which is the biggest problem on the internet. But I think people are continuing to think of new ways to target them. ES Rounds, Erudition and Digimarc announced Bitcoin-based anti-piracy solution for ebooks. I have been interested in this a little bit. There are a number of Bitcoin Bitcoin blockchain, I guess, which is the technology. Bitcoin is one of the forms that blockchain takes. There are a number of startups that are trying to do this and trying to place content generation and production onto the blockchain, so there is a consistent record. A lot of this is still in beta testing, or just getting started. Most of the implementation that I am aware of has taken place in music. There are a lot of music startups, but I actually didn't know about Digimarc, and I'll look into it. ES Rounds, if you're more interested in talking about this, you can send an email through staff to me, and I'll be happy to share the information that I've collected. Hopefully, in the next couple of months, we'll have either a blog piece or a bulletin article about it. Okay, Barbara, I have heard of a site called Blasty. I think Serena already addressed this. Okay, great. I guess those are all the questions. Cheryl and Serena, did you have any final thoughts? Any words of encouragement? Rallying the troops?
Well, I would say, don't panic. At the beginning of your search for how to understand piracy, it looks bad. Like it looks, that the whole world is out to get you and your book is for free everywhere. And I often say the first time you find your book for free on a pirate site, you feel nauseated. But the 50th time, it's just another day at the office. And that's just, that's just the way it is. But it is worth it to fight those sites that are the hardest on your marketing. And I do it knowing that it's helping.
Absolutely. And just to also go back to something that Cheryl said that really struck me was a coordinated effort. And in this respect, I feel like the community of writers can be really helpful, like knowledge sharing. I'm sure Serena, Facebook groups where I see them where people, will sort of like rally together against a certain, particularly bad offender. So Facebook groups, other sort of message boards, the community of writers is really important in this because, there is the legal framework that we're working on in legislative advocacy, which is important in its own way, but kind of on the day-to-day, I think not only can participating in these communities maybe give you more confidence immediately, but also actually, help you attack these pirates. So, Cheryl?
I was going to say, and the more data we have from writers on the ground, so to speak, the more we are able to go to Congress, the more we are able to lobby, the more we are able to write briefs to courts, amicus curiae briefs, to urge the courts to make decisions that more strongly protect creators' rights. So the more data you have, the better for all of us.
Absolutely, and also in our conversations with Amazon, Google, etc., it would be very helpful to know.
We love to be able to tell them numbers.
Yes, numbers are always great. I should have had more numbers in this PowerPoint. It's kind of deficient in numbers. Thank you everyone for attending. And Serena, thank you so much for sharing your experience. Cheryl, thank you so much. And we'll see you in the next webinar.
So